Good Friday afternoon to you. Welcome to the John Sanchez Show on News Talk 780 KOH. It's a pleasure to be with you on this Friday, on this record-setting IPO day. What a day it was with the SpaceX IPO. My goodness, my almost 36 years of doing this, never ever have I seen an IPO do what this one did. It was amazing. Not that it had an incredible performance, but just the demand for it. Just so much fun to talk about. It's Friday, obviously. Amen to that, as you heard Kristen and Jack talk about. Happy Friday to all of you also. And let me tell you what I have lined up for you this afternoon on the program. Fridays I kind of use as my catch-up day, right? It's a sit down and let's go through everything that happened. Besides these big SpaceX IPO and what happened, why it happened, so on and so forth. We're going to talk about the biggest winners and losers on the street this week. What moved the Dow? What moved the S&P 500? What moved the NASDAQ? We're going to throw in some information about interest rates, inflation, and, of course, the bond market. Remember, we had two inflationary reports this week. Obviously, we get into some of the commodity side of things. And then, most importantly, what should you as an investor be watching for next week? And then whether today's market environment, the environment we're in right now, is creating an opportunity or is it creating risk for you and your portfolio? So lots of things to talk about today. But first, let's get the show started with the Iran situation. Right? How can we do a show without talking about Iran? So as we learned yesterday, as the market, shot up significantly, almost 1,000-point gain on the Dow. I think it was 950 if I remember correctly. When the president yesterday started the day off by saying we're going to bomb the heck out of Iran and basically take over their entire industry of oil, to a few hours later when he said, nope, not going to do that. Matter of fact, a deal is imminent. And as I said on the show, studies have shown he has said that 30 times that a deal is imminent. So doesn't mean that the street doesn't believe it. So we come into today and the action was strong. It was strong because we had the IPO coming up, but it was also strong because oil prices were dipping on those comments yesterday in the news. And then we start to progress through the morning, thinking everything is fine. Bloomberg reported early this morning that the deal could be signed in Switzerland this Sunday between us and Iran. Evidently, it's another 14-point deal. Well, and here it comes. Evidently, yesterday, a drone hit a ship that is an Indian flag ship. And I guess about 3 people were killed on it. India's blaming us. We're blaming Iran. So this created some problems. President came out with a True Social post this morning. See if I can, 6:40 a.m. and said the following. The terms that Iran leaked out to the fake news, and he's referring to our news as well as Iranian news service reported this, have, in quote, or in capitals, nothing to do with the terms that we agreed to in writing. What they said, including their weak and pathetic statement on having a deal, bears no relation to the truth. Very dishonorable people to deal with. With them, there is no such thing as dealing in good faith. Capital letters, amazing exclamation point. Also, their totally rebuffed drone attack last night against Indian ships, leaving the Hormuz Strait is totally unacceptable. They better get their act together and fast. President Donald J. Trump. Yeah, you would have thought by reading that, you'd go, looks like this deal may be off, right? Here we go again for the 31st time. Well, later in the morning, Pakistani Prime Minister Sharif, said that, quote, a final agreed upon text of a deal has been reached. And then the market moved up on that news. Iranian state media reported that the draft version of the U.S.-Iran Memorandum of Understanding includes a commitment from the U.S. to lift oil sanctions, as well as a commitment from Iran to reopen the Strait of Hormuz. And again, they're talking that this deal could be signed as soon as this Sunday in Switzerland. Still don't know the terms of the deal. How soon will the Strait of Hormuz be open? Will Iran still be able to control it? What about the nuclear side? Trump had made mention, wasn't the post that I shared with you, but earlier in another post that basically, once again, they're not going to have any capability of making a nuclear weapon for years, is what it was, for years, not permanently, but for years. And so, oil prices, I think, are really starting to be the adult in the room. They're seeing these headlines, these Truth Social posts, these news comments coming out of Iran, their news agency. And it's just kind of taking it with a grain of salt now. We're not seeing massive swings in oil prices like we used to. Again, the market's become very jaded to everything. So we will see. We will keep our fingers crossed that Sunday rolls around and some type of a deal is struck. But I'm not holding my breath. I'm sure many of you are thinking the exact same thing. But that's how our day started. Okay, now, let's get to the SpaceX IPO, which I know so many of you have been so interested in. So let's kind of put this in context for you just a little bit. I'm going to give you a little bit of education on IPOs if you've never dealt with them, so you kind of understand how this, it's literally a game, how this whole IPO game is played by the Wall Street banks. It's fascinating. So Wall Street banks get together, and there were a number of them because this, again, folks, was the largest IPO ever in history. Okay. Trades on the NASDAQ. SPCX is the symbol. So these Wall Street banks get together, and they've been working on this for years. They are the underwriters, kind of sub-underwriters, joint book runners. I mean, there's all kinds of different terms. The bottom line, you got a bunch of Wall Street firms. They're allocated a certain amount of shares. Their responsibility is to go sell those shares to their clients. The total dollar value that these Wall Street firms made off of this deal, according to CNBC today, $500 billion. Excuse me, 500 million. I said the same thing on the stock update this morning. $500 million they made. 500 million. Think about that. And again, I don't know how many banks are involved. You'll never know unless you read the memorandum of offering, but I'm sure there's quite a few, but still significant, lucrative piece of business for Wall Street. I want you to keep an eye on these Wall Street firms when earnings season rolls around, because obviously we are still in the second quarter. And so this should have a very positive impact to the bottom line for these investment banks. Okay, so the deal. So these Wall Street banks, they pitch the deal to institutions, mutual funds, hedge funds, anybody that will listen to them. This is what's been going on behind the scenes. The day finally comes today. Yesterday, they officially priced the deal at $135 a share. That valued the shares at about $70 billion. Okay. It valued the overall company north of $1 trillion. And the reason I say north and I can't give you an exact number is because, again, we don't know the real total amount of shares that are outstanding. I've seen somewhere around 500 million shares that are still outstanding. Who knows, right? So that's the only way that you're going to figure it out, is knowing those numbers exactly. So they're valued, again, well over $1 trillion now. Elon Musk, I think it held there based upon how the stock performed. I believe he is the first trillionaire ever in our history. Can you imagine that? Personal wealth of $1 trillion. That's based upon his combined stakes in SpaceX, Tesla, etc. So deal priced at $135. As I said throughout the updates this morning, market opened up at 6:30. Stock didn't trade. Took a couple hours, which is exactly what I said was going to happen. It takes a while. Stock opens up, and it starts moving higher and moving higher. And it opened, the first trade, I believe, was right around $150 a share. So what does this mean? Because everybody wanted to get their hands on this. And like I said on the show yesterday, what's very interesting to remember is the NASDAQ, where the stock trades, changed the rules for SpaceX. Here's what I mean. The prior rule was you had to be publicly traded for about 90 days before you could be included into an index. And in this case, the index I'm referring to is the NASDAQ 100. Many of you know it by the ETF that trades under that, the QQ. But remember, there's all kinds of other ETFs and mutual funds and things that track the NASDAQ 100. Well, again, prior to this deal, you had to be publicly traded for 90 days before being considered to be added to that 100 list. And then that means all of these ETFs, all of these mutual funds that track the NASDAQ 100, they buy your stock, drives your stock higher, is the theory behind it. NASDAQ said, wait a minute here. This is the world's largest IPO. We're going to bend the rules here. We're going to change the rules. Guess what, SpaceX? You can be added to the NASDAQ 100 right away. So this morning, we started to see the NASDAQ fall while the Dow was holding on. And I made the comment on the stock update. And I said, look at Ross, here's what's going on. We're seeing a rotation out of some of the bigger tech names like the Microsofts, the old, I'll use the term, the old stodgy tech names, right? Microsofts and so on and so forth. And we're seeing money coming out of those and being redeployed into Starlink. Or SpaceX, excuse me. And that held for a little bit of time, and then NASDAQ finally started to take off a little bit. So now SpaceX is going to be added again to all these indexes, and all those indexes are going to be buying it. Well, it's already done, to my knowledge. It's already, those indexes already include it. So if SpaceX, quote, takes off, you should see that NASDAQ 100 do the same, right? I don't know how big what percentage of the NASDAQ 100, I'll try to dig that up, what percentage of the NASDAQ 100 SpaceX represents. But the bottom line is it's going to be big. And again, all these funds buying the stock. So the stock took off, like I said, and did, as everybody thought. I'll tell you what I was impressed with today with SpaceX. So again, it was priced at 135, first trade right around 150. It finished the day at $160. Okay, so $10.95 gain. Not bad, but up $25.95 from the IPO price. Percentage wise, it was a 19.22% gain. 555.56 million shares were offered. That's what we call the float now. The rest of the shares are being held by SpaceX and probably some of there were so many different private equity firms and things that funded this company years and years ago. Remember, this is a 22, 25-year-old company. Elon Musk just acquired it a few years ago and got the name and all that. But SpaceX, it used to be called Space Exploration. It's been around for a long time. So I was very impressed that this thing didn't go parabolic. That would have been a scary thing because the next step is it falls to the earth, right? If it goes parabolic. This is nice, solid. The underwriters did a heck of a job. The market makers did a heck of a job keeping this thing somewhat contained. So very, very happy with the performance of it. But really what it has done now, it's made everybody aware, like, oh, if I'm sitting on a bunch of cash and this stock is being added to the NASDAQ 100, I better get off my hands and get some of my cash put to work. That's the theory behind a successful IPO. And remember, this is just one of, there's really about three others, OpenAI and Anthropic, and I forget the other one, that are expected this year. Probably not going to be quite this big, but they're going to be in the billions is what they're saying. So overall, very, very successful day with SpaceX and a successful day with the market. I'll tell you what this market did when we come back. Welcome back to the John Sanchez Show on Newstalk 780 KOH. Happy Friday to all of you. And again, what a great way to wrap up the week. Strong stock market action, great IPO today. Yeah, it's the way you want to end the week. That's for sure. We deserve it. We absolutely deserve it. All right. Speaking of ending the week, how did we do? Well, again, I'll share with you the weekly numbers in just a moment, but it was not a phenomenal week. We went through a lot if you kind of think back over the last 5 days. But for today, it's all we care about right now. Here's how we did. 354-point gain on the Dow, 0.70%. We broke above the 51,000 mark again, 51,202. NASDAQ rose 26 points, 0.31%. Excuse me, NASDAQ closed up 79 points, 0.31% to a close of 25,888. And the S&P up 37 points, 0.5%, closing at 7,431. And the Russell 2000, about a 0.75% rise there, up 23 points. So not huge numbers, right? I mean, we see this all the time, but yeah, once again, the SpaceX IPO was a great catalyst for today. If you just joined us, once again, the stock gained $25.95, 19.22% to 160.95. But again, that's from the pricing point of 135. The first trade on the stock was about 150 today, and so yeah, not much else I want to say. I do want to have a little bit of fun because it's Friday. I want to share with you some stats in regards to this situation. So. Remember this is where I was starting to go with this earlier. So the IPO value was $75 billion. That was the IPO value, right? So take the number of shares they offered times the $135 price, and it comes up with 75 billion. But again, this company, folks, is valued at 1.5 trillion. Think about that for a second. Out of the gate, valued at 1.5 trillion. Now, remember, it was only a few years ago I made a big deal up sitting behind this microphone when I think it was Apple was the first one that surpassed $1 trillion market value. And now they're, I believe, I don't know, 3 trillion, 4 trillion. NVIDIA's right up in there. So, almost nowadays, I hate to say this, almost $1 trillion. It's like, okay. But again, for a new publicly traded company, pretty amazing. It was, again, almost impossible to get it on a retail basis. So a lot of people were saying, how do we get a hold of this? And I kept saying, you can't. You got to wait till it starts trading, right? The IPO pricing, that's for, like I said, all the big institutions. The stock has surged roughly 25% since 2010. 25,000%. If we go back to 2010, the S&P 500 has gained 610%. So isn't that crazy? Think about that. Pretty crazy. What many are saying about this? I mean, Elon Musk was at their command center in Texas when the stock started trading. He was giving a speech to the employees before that. Really good speech. And he's, again, what do you say about Elon Musk? I don't think at least in my lifetime, we'll never see another Elon Musk, but Mars is on the horizon, and he said, even beyond, right? And they're talking, and he looked into the audience, all of his employees, and he's saying, this is for all of you. And then he looks in the camera, and for all of you, meaning everybody watching around the world, that we want to make space exploration available to everybody. Everybody, kind of like I said, pointed around the room. So, like everybody says, never count out Elon Musk. And what may sound like crazy dreams and ideas, the man tends to somehow make it happen again. He's the genius of our time. There's God help us if something ever happens to him. So I don't know. Like I said, he became the first trillionaire again with his ownership stake and voting rights. He's got a lot of voting rights in SpaceX, and he likes to do that. Of course, is when he's buys a company or takes these companies over or takes them public, he likes maintaining the voting right, which you can't blame him, stay in control of it. So I think that's about all I have to share with you on SpaceX. It was, like I said, just a very, very successful day for it. Now, if we turn things over as far as the rest of the market was concerned, like I said a moment ago, kind of lackluster, as far as the week was concerned. It really, wasn't a significant amount of action going on. I mean, just barely moved up overall. And like I said, it was a tough one. It was a week where we had way higher than expected inflationary data, both on the CPI side and on the PPI side. We had obviously the headlines going back and forth. Got to deal with Iran, don't have a deal with Iran, so on and so forth. So I think, to kind of get out of the week, and I'm just going to kind of summarize it, just almost in a flat situation. I think we're pretty lucky. I really do. This thing could have gone, a lot of different directions, but once again, it really didn't. It just kind of muddled along by the time the closing bell came today. So not too shabby whatsoever. All right, we're going to delve into more details, the headlines that move the market this week, and then final segment, we'll get into what's going on next week. Help you prepare for that one. Welcome back to the John Sanchez Show on Newstalk 780 KOH. Happy Friday to all of you. Great day on the street today. If you didn't hear, let me bring you up to date. Again, a strong session. We finished with gains across the board. Thanks again to a number of different factors. One, hopefully the war will end, but I do have an update for you, and not the most positive update, unfortunately, but SpaceX IPO, very much of a star today. 354 gain on the Dow, closing level 51,202. Nasdaq rose 79.31% to 25,888, and the S&P up 37 points or 0.5% to 7,431. All right, let's hit the commodity side today. We finished down $2.93 on oil, 84.88 a barrel. Can you believe that? Getting close to that $70 plus mark. Gold was strong with $116.70 rise, 4,239.20, and the bond market, I think this is another one that we can kind of just go, made it away with the skin of our chin in this one. Only a 2 basis point increase for the 10-year treasury for the week. 4.49 was our closing yield today. But for the week, it was down 5 basis points. Now, why am I saying that? Well, let's take you back to earlier this week. Wednesday and Thursday to be exact, we had, of course, the CPI data on Wednesday and the PPI data on Thursday. And once again, these numbers came in much, much hotter than expected. Remember, we were north of 6% year over year on the PPI data yesterday, the wholesale measure of inflation. Now, what does that mean? Well, you and I both know it costs a heck of a lot more money to go to the grocery store, to obviously put gas in the tank, all the different things that we need to live our lives. And the data absolutely showed that. However, Wall Street didn't really get all that excited about it. It just, once again, it just kind of took it in stride. And what you have to watch, of course, is you have to watch the bond market. You have to understand the bond market's the one that's really the most sensitive. And for bond yields to, again, actually fall about 5 basis points for the week, like I said, I think we made it out pretty good. So remember, CPI was up 0.5% from April to May. You had core CPI up just 0.2%, not just. But the PPI month over month headline, where you include food and energy, up 1.1%. And like I said, up a little over 6% on a year-to-date basis, year-over-year basis, I should say. So very nasty inflationary numbers. And like I said, market really didn't even budge on the news. So this is an interesting market. I'm going to kind of get into my soapbox here. What's really going on? What did we learn from this week, right? Every trading day, every week, every month, every quarter, every year, we have to learn something. And that's a great thing about this industry. You learn something every single day, right? Hour by hour. So what did we learn this week? What's the biggest takeaways? So first of all, a little bit of an encouraging note. The strength extended well beyond technology this week, right? We had a lot of areas of the market that did very, very well. It wasn't just about chips and software and pretty much things technology related. So that was very much of a positive this week. Of course, if we can believe it or not, easing geopolitical concerns. But again, I'm going to share with you a story that I just picked up during the break. Obviously, the SpaceX IPO. Now, why is that so positive? Well, I told you, again, the stock's going to be added, if it already hasn't been, to the NASDAQ 100. But more importantly, it creates a psyche. It's like when you start seeing selling and you want to join the party, right? Hey, the market's going down. I'm going to sell. Everyone else is selling. Same thing with when you get a good IPO like this, or a great IPO. Like everyone's like, hey, you know what? my risk appetite just got greater. I'm hungry. Let's delve into a little bit more risk in the portfolio. So that drives the market higher. We continue to see semiconductor leadership this week. That was wonderful. The likes of Nvidia, yeah, did okay and stuff. But you look at some of these others like Advanced Micro Devices and SanDisk and so on and so forth. A lot of these other big names did pretty well this week. They had some down days, but overall, the risk appetite absolutely there. So AMD today, just alone, up $23.12, 4.73% to $511.57. So we got our risk appetite back, at least for the time being. Broad-based gains, right? We saw some strength across the cyclical sectors, etc. And I think the biggest takeaway that I have of this week is it appears once again that investors, both large and small, are willing to look past the headlines. As I said earlier this week, and I've said for months actually, this market has headline fatigue. When you're being told, 31 times now that a deal is coming in the next couple of days and it doesn't happen, that weighs on everybody. But we've become jaded, right? It's like I don't know. It's like the kid that gets yelled at by his parents all the time, and maybe the first 5 times he gets upset when he gets yelled at, and then the 6th time going forward, it's like a stone wall. He's just like, I've heard this, been here, done that before. It's where the market is right now. It's like, okay, yep, we had the bad news when the war broke out on February 28th, and we're just becoming jaded to whether it's ceasefire news or no ceasefire news. Market's focusing back on, again, strength of AI, strength of technology, and now of course this strong IPO. So we broad-based, we broadened our gains this week in a lot of different sectors, a lot of different areas. I like that. I like that it's just not focused on tech. That's a dangerous game, as we all know. We saw that a couple times this week. And remember 2 days ago when the Dow lost over 900 points and NASDAQ was down severely, over 500, et cetera. They can happen very quickly, as I've always warned everybody. Where do we sit on a year-to-date basis? Last time I did this a couple days ago, man, we were heading south very quickly, especially on the NASDAQ. But again, we've recovered quite a bit, but not where we were, not at our peak here a few weeks ago. So on a year-to-date basis, the Dow's up 6.5%. NASDAQ is up 11.4%. The S&P has gained 8.6%. And the Russell 2000, the small caps, 18.6%. This, I think, folks, barring, again, any unusual geopolitical issues, whatever the case is, I want you over the weekend to do me a favor. Check your 401k, check your IRAs, check your brokerage accounts, see what your small cap exposure is, because again, it's doing very well compared to the other major averages, first of all. So my point is, you need some small cap in your portfolio if you don't have it. I see a lot of 401ks, review a lot of 401ks, and even, of course, brokerage statements. And a lot of people really shy away from the Russell 2000 type of stocks, the small caps. You really shouldn't. They should be an integral allocation in your portfolio based upon your risk tolerance and your time horizon. Because as you see, you get years like this where it really starts to surpass the performance of the big names and in even the mid cap. I mean, the mid cap 400 is up 14.9% year to date. So, no one's even coming close to the Russell 2000, again, up 18.6%. So check your allocation. Make sure you got some exposure there. Now, where you have to be careful on the small caps is this. If the street is correct and we don't get an interest rate cut this year, small caps are very interest rate sensitive. So for whatever reason, if we start to see bond yields going back up, that's a negative sign on a sustainable basis. That's a negative sign for the small cap stocks. They don't like a rising interest rate environment. Why? Because they are big borrowers, right? They're young, hungry companies. They consume a lot of cash. They have very, very high cash burn rates. And therefore, you start to see those names go down, or that sector go down, and that industry go down when we get rising interest rates. And that's the primary reason behind it, because again, they are huge consumers of cash. They're young and they're growing. It's like having a young teenage boy and he can eat 12 tacos. Talking about myself when I was there. Wish I could do that now. But anyways, again, great area at this point. Just be cautious about it. Now, before I go to break, I want to come back to a story picked up during the break. It's not breaking news by any means. It was about 2 hours ago. And it's in regards to this proposed, if you just joined us, the Pakistani leader Sharif, who's been helping negotiate the deal between the two countries, us and Iran, made comments earlier today saying, final agreed upon text has been done. And they're talking about, again, meeting us in Iran, meeting in Switzerland Sunday, this coming Sunday, to sign everything. However, here's what the story is indicating. It says the U.S. and Iran could sign a deal that includes reopening the Strait of Hormuz and taking steps to dismantle Iran's nuclear program in the next few days, a senior Trump administration said today. But the official, who spoke to reporters on condition of anonymity to discuss the latest developments in the negotiations with Iran, said the U.S. is, quote, not 100% confident that the agreement can be reached, called the Memorandum of Understanding, and even that it's going to be signed. He said, I maybe would have said 75% this morning. It's probably more like 80 to 85% now that it's going to be signed, but he said it's absolutely not 100%. He says Iran's system is very complicated and there are internal fractures within the regime. The memorandum of understanding, as it currently stands, also guarantees a long-term peace in the region by ending Iran's funding of violence and imposes an inspection regime on the Islamic Republic, the official said. If Iran complies, it will be rewarded with significant economic relief, including the loosening of long-term sanctions and having its assets unfrozen. That frozen asset, that's a big, big issue with Iran. They want those funds that we have frozen released. But those benefits only accrue if they actually deliver, the official emphasized. The official also said that the two sides have not determined where the deal would be signed. Again, rumor has it it's going to be in Switzerland. The U.S. nevertheless believes that both parties like the text in its current form and will get to a signature within the next few days unless we see issues pop up. Israel's and other regional allies are expected to get on board, the official said, even after Israeli Defense Minister Katz said Friday morning that Tel Aviv will not withdraw its forces from Lebanon, Syria, Gaza, and a northern area of the West Bank. So that's the part that got me. We know in the past negotiations, Iran, that was one of the sticking points with Iran. They wanted Israel to stop everything going on in Lebanon. Now we're learning that it's not going to happen. So, like I said, I just want to bring that to your attention. Think about that going through the weekend. It'll be interesting where we are in the futures at 3:00 this Sunday afternoon, if anything gets signed, etc. But it's the world we live in, right? You just again, what I like about it, not to repeat myself, but is the market's really become jaded to this. And so I don't think anybody's going to believe anything until the ink is dry. Let's just leave it at that. John Sanchez Show on Newstalk 780 KOH. I hope you have a great weekend if I don't get a chance to remind you of that. And can't wait to be back with you on Monday. All right, let's focus. Today's done. Week's done. Let's focus on next week. Here's the bright side. Next week, looking pretty light on the economic calendar. No real major reports except for one, but I don't think it's going to be any market moving type of information. That'll be on Wednesday when we get the FOMC's minutes from the June meeting. Again, don't think that's going to be any big thing, but that's probably the biggest one. We've got some industrial production capacity utilization numbers on Monday. No big deal there. Housing starts and building permits on Tuesday. Retail sales on Wednesday. That can always move things one direction or the other. Like I said, on Wednesday, also the FOMC minutes. And then that's really about it. We're at the tail end of earnings season. Not a lot of big names are still left to report. So why am I telling you all this? Well, this is a good thing, right? So here's what I'm kind of seeing going forward. So much, of course, is dependent upon if this deal gets done. Now, first of all, let's go back to the successful SpaceX IPO. Again, closed today at $160.95. There is a ton of speculation out there by various fund managers that this company is way overvalued. If that holds, you could see some profit taking going on in the stock. Now, remember, a lot of people, employees specifically, have lockup periods, right? Even though they have the shares, they can't sell them. Many times, 6 months is kind of a common lockup period. Sometimes there's, shorter time periods. So the street's not real concerned that you're going to get a bunch of people dumping these shares. But at the same time, this valuation talk about SpaceX could continue to linger. And if that's the case, there's some big hedge funds out there that are actually shorting SpaceX already. Again, they feel that the stock's going to go down. So if it starts to unwind, let's say Monday, Tuesday, that would be a negative for the market. If it continues to climb, at least in a small fashion, I think that's a positive. The other positive I'm seeing right now, of course, let's go back to the headline once again. If a deal is signed on Sunday, I don't think you're going to see a major 1,000-point gain on the Dow or 500-point gain on the NASDAQ because of that. The street, again, has proven over and over again, it is expecting a deal. It doesn't know if it's next week, next month, whenever it may be. It is expecting a deal. So I would not expect a major rally if a deal gets done. Like I said, it's kind of baked into the cake, at this point. But beyond that, I think really the big focus for me and for our portfolios is really going to be looking at the chip stocks, the software, some of the names that were very, very volatile this week. Like I said, Advanced Micro Devices, just using them as a proxy. Strong day today, up a little over $23. But what we experienced this week is these stocks are they're on a kind of, imagine a pyramid. They're sitting right at the top of the pyramid and they can tilt either way. They can continue to go up that pyramid or they can go to the left or to the right and fall apart. We experienced that again a couple times this week. Investors are very nervous. They've had huge gains in the chips names. Again, whether it's NVIDIA, Advanced Micro Devices, KLA, it doesn't matter. And they're using any excuse that they possibly can to get rid of them or at least trade them. Really, they've really become a trading vehicle, not so much a long-term buy and hold type of thing. So that group is going to be probably the most critical thing we're going to experience next week, again, barring any geopolitical outliers that are out there. So watch those chip stocks, as I've said each time this week, and for many weeks. If we have a day of weakness in those stocks, it tends to be a good buying opportunity, a dollar cost averaging strategy into there. As far as everything else, just please make sure, again, you have a diversified portfolio. If you need to seek professional advice, please give us a call at the office, 775-800-1801. And I've got some big announcements come Monday on our next estate planning webinar for my new company, Specialized Trust and Estate Plan. If we can be of service on that, go to our website, specializedtrust.com. Alrighty, folks, we're going to call it a week. God bless. Have a great weekend. Try to stay cool out there, and I'll be back with you on Monday. Take care.